Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is post-match reaction showtime after Liverpool have just suffered their second loss of the Premier League campaign, falling down by 1-0 on the South Coast against Ralph Hasenhüttl's Southampton in a match where pretty much everything that could have gone wrong for Liverpool went wrong. I think it's fair to say that the performance on our end was abject. It's also fair to say that Southampton did a very good job. They made things difficult for us throughout the match. And it's also entirely fair to say, and I'd like to think that even if you were a neutral watching this, or any neutral who was watching the game, would be able to admit that the refereeing performance was utterly shocking. And at times bewildering from Andre Manor. At times decisions being made that just beggared belief, that no one of sane or rational mind could sit down and thoroughly and correctly explain how those decisions had been come to. And I did a little bit thinking about what order to go through things in this video, whether to cover Liverpool's performance first, Southampton's performance first, or the referee's performance first. And I think it's only fair to start with Liverpool. You know, whenever you lose a game, and especially when it is at least partially your own fault, you should not look anywhere else other than yourselves first, because at the end of the day, there's nothing Liverpool can do about Southampton playing well going forward. There isn't really much we can do about Andre Mariner being useless going forward. Everything that we can do to try and make sure that this result is not emblematic of what is to come and that we turn it round is to do with our own performance. So we have to look at that and be introspective. And the fact of the matter is, Liverpool were, for the entire match today, not good enough. Whether it was in the first half when we simply couldn't string 3 passes together, or in the second half when we finally managed to get in Southampton's half but were utterly bereft of ideas as soon as we got anywhere near the 18-yard box. Liverpool were appalling from start to finish. And like with the Newcastle game, the only thing that I can say to our credit is we got better. I think as the game went on, we certainly weren't as bad as we were in the first half, where, as I said, it was like watching a Sunday League match, and that was from both ends. I think in the first half, while I said Southampton played well and definitely merited the 3 points, I thought in the first 45 minutes, they were almost just as bad as us. It was borderline Sunday League level, the way that the ball was not sticking to either team. Everyone was giving it away after 2 or 3 passes, and they weren't giving it away because of good defensive positioning or fantastic tackles or well orchestrated presses. It was being given away in a scrappy manner, you know, players just sticking legs out, flying around, the ball bouncing this way and that, and eventually someone would come away with it through no real no real effort of their own. It was just blind luck, whichever team came away with the ball, and generally they'd pass it around maybe a couple of times, and then one of the passes would go astray, and then the whole cycle would repeat over and over and over again for pretty much the entire 45 minutes. It was diabolical from both teams, and at first I was kind of all right with it because we'd been put through 2 so boring games against West Brom and Newcastle that I was happy to just see the ball moving around a little bit more, the ball changing hands, teams getting to either end of the pitch reasonably quickly, even though what tended to happen once they got to the opposition end of the pitch was they'd give it away in a pretty cheap fashion, whether it was Liverpool or Southampton. It's obviously a well-worked routine from Southampton. You can definitely criticise Trent Alexander-Arnold for the way he handles Danny Ings, the way he lets him go and allows him to have the shot on goal. And I think you'd be right to criticise Trent Alexander-Arnold for a lot of things this evening. There was a rather shocking stat that Martin Tyler came out with after he came off, which was that he'd given the ball away 38 times today, which is more than any other Premier League player in a single match this season. And you know, the worst thing about that stat is it didn't really come as a surprise when he said it. You kind of nodded your head and went, yeah, it's looked like that. It's really looked like that today. He was way off the pace, as was everyone, especially, like I said, in that first half. We couldn't keep hold of the ball. Southampton couldn't keep hold of the ball. It was so scrappy. And what's annoying is that we did not seize any initiative. You know, Liverpool have got good enough players on the pitch that they can seize that initiative. Thiago Alcantara started this game. He is good enough to take control of a game that is a little bit scrappy. The same goes for Gini Wijnaldum, Mo Salah, Sadio Mane, Roberto Firmino, Jordan Henderson, Fabinho. Every single one of those outfield players, and the goalie as well, is more than good enough technically to take a game like that by the scruff of the neck, but they all got hopelessly sucked into it, and the ball was just bouncing this way and that. There was no control from either side, to be fair, to actually get a grip on that first half. And Liverpool didn't deserve anything from that early period, and I'd argue we didn't deserve anything from the second half either. While it was very much a game in two halves, it was a different story in that second half. We toiled and toiled and toiled in a way that was just utterly toothless. You know, Sadio Mane was very much the best of a bad bunch. He was at least trying to be direct, getting into the box, trying to flash balls across the face of goal. And listen, maybe if Salah was on it and Firmino was on it, they're in the right places at the right time to get on the end of some of those Sadio Mane passes. But the fact is they weren't, and Mane simply didn't have it in him to do everything by himself. He was struggling a little bit as well, I think it's fair to say, against Kyle Walker-Peters, although there's, you know, Andre Mariner had a little bit of a role to play in that supposedly two-man tussle, I think it's fair to say. But he just didn't quite have the quality to win the game on his own, and no one else was giving him any help whatsoever. I thought Gini Wijnaldum was anonymous at best and terrible at worst. You know, when he was actually getting on the ball, he was bereft of ideas, you know, always playing the safest pass possible, something that we criticised the players for after the West Brom game, after the Newcastle game, and we're going to have to come back to it again now, not being adventurous enough, not being direct enough, and not taking risks with your passes, and just going for one that forces all the responsibility on another player, just basically saying, oh, he can do it, he can unlock the defence, he can try and find a way through, he can do all the thinking and use his technical ability, because I'm just going to pass the ball 5 yards because it's the easy option. That seemed to be the mindset of pretty much every single Liverpool player apart from Sadio Mane today, and maybe apart from Thiago as well, who did at least attempt some slightly more audacious passes, but did not do enough to really make any impression on the game. Maybe partially as well because he's playing in that deeper role, and that's maybe why Liverpool could have looked to get someone like Phillips or Reece Williams on the pitch to free up Henderson to move further forward, that would allow Thiago to move further forward and get better players into more decisive positions once it became clear in the second half that it was going to be a little bit more of attack versus defence. Southampton very much looking to defend their lead. But Liverpool didn't do that. We brought on Xherdan Shaqiri, who, you know, as I said on Twitter during the game, I don't know what the question is, but I don't think Shaqiri's the answer. I've said before on pre-match videos that I'd like to see him given an opportunity to see what he can do. That's more than enough for me. I don't want to see that happen again. James Milner comes on because Trent is just having one of the worst games of his life and doesn't really do anything. I think that's the only two substitutions we make. So those are the changes that Liverpool try and make to the game. It does maybe put Southampton under a bit more pressure. The pressure definitely mounted as the game went on, but it was never any level of pressure that they weren't equal to. And that is now probably a decent segue to come on to Southampton played quite well. I think in the second half especially, their last-ditch defending was pretty good at times, and if it wasn't for that, then maybe Liverpool find their way through and get a draw. Looking back to maybe the Fulham game where they don't quite have as much in defence as Southampton, they end up conceding the equaliser, whereas Southampton managed to come away with a clean sheet today, and that is to their credit as well. As much as Liverpool were, as I said, toothless going forward, Southampton did do very well to nullify any decent moments that we did have, especially Sadio Mane, who was the key threat, and every time it looked like he'd finally get through a different Southampton player, whether it's Jack Stevens flying in with a fantastic block, or Fraser Forster getting down well to make a save, or any one of the other defenders clearing away one of the passes that Sadio Mane tries to drill across the box. Every single time Southampton were equal to what we tried to do against them. And then going forward as well, I thought they were remarkably press resistant. That's what really, really impressed me. Time and time again, Liverpool tried to close them down and win the ball back, and it happened in the first and second halves. And they just didn't seem like they were that much, not like they were under any pressure whatsoever. They could quite easily roll whatever Liverpool player was trying to close them down, come away with the ball. Then as a result, they're in acres of space, because what's happened is multiple Liverpool players, at best, have gone in to try and close the ball down and force an error. And the Southampton player has managed to get away from that tight space. And therefore, the space that has now been vacated by the Liverpool players who've gone into press is left for them to run into. And that worked for them time and time and time again. And it was incredibly frustrating to see, because what I think was the big concern today is that Southampton beat Liverpool at their own game in some ways. I think when it came to pressing and beating presses, they were excellent on all fronts. And it's understandable that they are that way because they play a similar way to us. So in training, they're going to do these pressing drills. So they're going to know how to spring those traps as well. They're going to know how to break out of them. And that showed today with the way they played. They brought their A game to this match. And Liverpool simply didn't. That's sort of a bit of pathetic fallacy there. I'm not saying I did it deliberately, but it sort of sums things up, don't you think? But Southampton did play very, very well. It's a great finish from Danny Ings as well to get the goal. You know, like I said, you can criticise Trent, but at the end of the day, there's still a hell of a lot for Ings to do, and we know he's a good goal scorer for Southampton. We all knew he was going to be a threat going into this game, so it's no real surprise that he is the one that gets the goal. But I do think on the balance of things, they certainly merited the 3 points, especially compared to the performance of Liverpool, which, like I said, deserved pretty much nothing out of that game. But finally, of course, it wasn't just Liverpool playing badly and Southampton playing very well that influenced the result of that game. I would like to think that if someone with a brain was refereeing that match, then we might have just scraped a point. Not necessarily a point we would have deserved, not necessarily a draw that would have been merited, but the fact of the matter is Liverpool were very, very hard done by officials. And to say we're hard done by is a fair way of putting it because, you know, it would be difficult to look at that game and not even be willing to suggest that there was some kind of deliberate nonsense going on from the officials. The handball one, I can't get my head around. I certainly think earlier on in the season, there's no way that doesn't get given as a penalty, you know, because they were giving them for handball left, right and centre. But even now they've kind of adapted the rules and changed the way the rules are being applied. If your hand's up there, then I actually, no, it's the other way around, isn't it? He's going to ground and his hand it's there, which is not a natural position when you are sliding in like that. If his arm was down by his side, then fine, it hits him, whatever. If his arm is, you know, even away from his body like that and it hits him, still it's quite close, but it's up. It's up in an unnatural position and it's somehow not been given. And it's a pretty clear opportunity for Liverpool as well. That ball is heading towards the goal in some capacity, whether it's going to be saved or going to go in or going to hit a Liverpool player or a Southampton defender in a last-ditch attempt to get it away. That is a clear goal-scoring opportunity that has been denied by someone using their arm in an illegal manner. And the referees ignored it and the VAR's ignored it. I don't even want to know who was on the VAR today because, quite frankly, it doesn't make a difference. They are pretty much all as bad as each other. You've then got the one where Sadio Mane is just bundled to the ground by Kyle Walker-Peters, where he kind of is all over the back of him and Mane hits the deck and we get nothing, which I'd almost be fine with if it wasn't for the fact that Paul Pogba does the exact same thing against Aston Villa a few days ago and it gets given. Go figure. Then you've got Sadio Mane getting bundled to the ground by Kyle Walker-Peters, round 2, that doesn't get given. So Sadio Mane goes and does the exact same thing to Kyle Walker-Peters and Southampton get a free kick. Again, go figure. You've then got the ball going out for a throw-in, but Liverpool getting a corner, which was bizarre. And I think because of how much the Southampton players put pressure on the officials, the linesman then flags to say that the corner has gone out of play when it hadn't. At this point, it's that one in particular is not even saying that the officials are working against Liverpool. That's just saying that the officials have completely lost their minds. And like I said, I think the fact that Southampton went absolutely berserk saying it wasn't a corner and should have been a throw-in is probably why it ends up being given as the ball going out in the first place, because both the referee and the linesman know that they've probably made a little bit of a cock-up there. So, like I said, I don't think we deserved anything out of that game, but it's annoying when you have the opportunity to grind out a half-decent result, to come away with a point when you haven't played well, and you don't get it, not because of anything you've done, but also because the officials have simply turned a blind eye to not one, but 2, maybe even 3 glaring errors, glaring fouls. Milner getting clattered by Theo Walcott as well. I completely forgot that had happened. That just kind of got ignored. No idea why. I'd love to hear Andre Mariner explain why someone just going in 2-footed off the ground through the back of someone is fine as long as James Milner gets half a cross away when he does it. Again, another thing that I just cannot fathom why it happened. So as I said, there were the reasons why Liverpool didn't win this game were threefold. The officiating was terrible, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jurgen Klopp has something to say after that game, and I would almost be annoyed if he didn't, because I think if the officials are going to be that bad, you can't let them get away with it, because it will simply carry on like that. Another one of the reasons was Southampton, to be fair to them, played well. Maybe not well enough to merit a win on normal circumstances. You know, against another team, you'd maybe say that they did enough for a draw. They defended well and heartily, etc., etc., etc. But the fact of the matter is, Liverpool did not deserve to get anything out of that game. And it is now starting to become a concern, because Man U have the opportunity to go ahead of us using their game in hand. I believe Manchester City also have the opportunity to go ahead of us with their game in hand. We have just given renewed hope to the rest of the chasing pack as well. And the issue is now Liverpool are not just fending off one challenger. You know, it's all right when it's just Tottenham and you think, well, it's okay because we'll get them to Anfield, we'll beat them, and that's problem solved, which is what happened earlier on in the season. It's not now just Manchester United where it's like, well, it's okay because we get them to Anfield, we beat them, problem solved. It's now Man United, Manchester City, and everyone else, you know, creeping up on us behind them that we've now got to fight off. And it is also now technically a little bit out of Liverpool's hands, because, as I said, if both Manchester clubs win their games in hand, then they are going to go above us in the league, and then things could get a little bit ugly, because, as I said, Liverpool are not playing well at the moment at all. But of course, putting the cup game aside, which is, you know, probably not even registering on Jurgen Klopp's mind right now, and probably won't even register on his mind until Friday evening when the game actually kicks off, the next challenge for Liverpool is Manchester United at home, which could be the worst possible thing to happen to us right now in this vein of form. But in some ways, if you want to, you know, end this video on a positive note, and Lord knows I think we all need to, it could also be the best thing that could possibly happen to us right now, and it could be exactly what we need to give us the kick up the backside that I think on today's evidence this squad desperately needs. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did somehow enjoy the release that this video may have given you, then do hit that like button down there. Let me know down in the comments below as well what you thought of the performance and what your hopes are for the rest of the season, given the position we now find ourselves in. Apart from that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back soon for the pre-match content for the game against Villa. Until then, bye for now.